Welcome to a special subscribers edition of Whiskey Lore. I'm Drew Hanish. Well, I don't know why it's taken me so long to actually put this episode together and get it out to you, but about 7 months ago, I had the honor of sitting down with Richard Paterson of Whyte and McKay and Greg Glass from Whyte and McKay, and we had a chance to discuss Shackleton's whiskey. Now, for those that don't know, Richard Paterson had the honor of going down to New Zealand, getting his hands on 3 bottles of 100-year-old, well-preserved in the ice, single malt whiskey. And he got to bring them back to Scotland, do analysis, and then he created a replica of that whiskey, and he created a Shackleton-inspired blended malt whiskey, and that blended malt whiskey is what drew my attention to this whole Shackleton story and got me wanting to talk with Richard Paterson about all of this. And so I sent an email to Whyte and McKay, and I said I would like to see if I could get in and do an interview about this particular story. And I was in Miami and got a voicemail from Richard Paterson, who was in Russia at the time, I believe. And he said when he was going to be back in town and that he would love to meet. And here we go. I got a chance to sit down and thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. We talked for probably about 4 hours or more about all sorts of history and whiskey. That guy remembers dates like you wouldn't believe. He was telling me stuff about American history that I had to go back and look up after I got home. So it was a fantastic day, a memory I will never forget. And then that night got to go to the Bon Accord, which is a great place if you're ever in Glasgow. Try out some whiskeys there. Greg Glass, who also works with Jura and Dalmore, and I'm trying to think who else is with Whyte and McKay, Paterson, all of those under the same umbrella. And so, had a chance to talk with him that evening, and just a great, great day. So I had this interview, and it was probably about 30 minutes that I recorded. And of that 30 minutes, probably about 10 minutes of it made it into the episode. So there's some left over. And for some reason, I've just been hanging on to it. But now I'm ready to let you hear it. So if you have listened to the first episode, then you've heard about his journey to New Zealand. You've heard about some of his interest in Ernest Shackleton and how he worked with this 100-year-old whiskey. In today's interview, I'm going to play you the parts where we talked about how he went about matching the whiskey, how a 100-year-old whiskey compares to today's whiskeys, since he's tasted both, and his experience in that first sip with the whiskey. So we're going to get into all of that. And he also has his own tasting technique. And for people in bourbon country, you've heard of the Kentucky Chew, most likely. Well, Richard Paterson has a completely different way of doing his tasting. And one of the things you're going to hear him talk about in here or that I joke with him about, is that whenever you watch him do a tasting, he always starts out by swirling it in the glass and then throwing the whiskey out of the glass. So he's going to describe that for you. I had a very interesting question for him about how he handled this particular 100-year-old whiskey when he had an opportunity to taste it, and how he went through his process of that. So let's jump right into this episode. And by the way, you can watch the video of that. I whipped out the phone and started recording him as he did this tasting. If you are a member of the Whiskey Lore Society, then in the newsletter, I will embed this video for you guys to watch. So make sure that you are subscribed. Just go to whiskey-lore.com/sign up, become a member for free, and then when that newsletter comes out, you'll have a chance to see it. Without further ado, let's get to the interview. So how did you go about nosing this and tasting it, what is your process for doing that? And do you kind of come up with a baseline whiskey that you start with and then just play with it from there to match, or how do you go about that?
First of all, what we have to do is we put it in the right glass, which is the Copita nosing glass that all blenders here in Scotland will use. That's shaped like a tulip, and therefore when you swirl it around and you say hello to the whiskey, then you go back and say, how are you? And then you go back and say, quite well, thank you very much. It starts to open up, like meeting you for the first time today. The more I talk to you, the more I like you, the more you show me your personality. But this personality for this whiskey from Shackleton had to wait 56 hours, because when I nosed at the beginning, I could see it was heavy, full of body, full of character, muscle, structure. It had the finesse and elegance, but it also had that sort of peaty note. But then I rested it for 48 hours, went back to it. Is it still there? No, there was other little connotations coming through, banana, a little hint of pear, and we've got that sort of raisins coming, because in fact it was sherry wood originally used. It was about 7 to 10 years old, but still that little peat hung in the balance. Then I waited 56 hours just to tease out the remaining aromas and nuances. So from that, I was able to formulate in my head what had maybe attributed to certain styles of whiskies, and it took, as I say, about 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks before I got all the right ingredients, formulated it, then married it, and then we could replicate the two together. So it was a long process, but what is so important is it once again resurrected the name of Ernest Shackleton, but for the first time, the important part, more than anything, was to show people what whiskey was like way back in 1907, and also to confirm that our forefathers at Glenmore Distillery and in Scotland knew exactly what they were doing.
So what would you say is the biggest difference between that whiskey that you tasted then versus whiskeys today?
The whiskey's real main comparison today, this was a Highland whiskey. It was very peaty, because peat from the land was very much part of the way in which whiskey was, originally manufactured or produced or distilled. So therefore, when we think of the whiskies then, peat was playing a major part, whereas today peat is generally reserved for the whiskies of the Isla, although I have to quickly say many of us are doing peaty whiskies throughout Scotland, but it wasn't so much the rugged whiskies as you see then as it is today. Whiskies are softer, more gentle. People want to be impressed by the body and character, but they don't want that aggression, and then we saturate it with soda, ice, or any mixers of Coca-Cola, etc. They want to taste it as it is. So you quite often hear the people, oh, he's a hard man, he's from Scotland, because we would drink whiskey at natural strength, we wouldn't put any ice or anything in it. But whereas today people are looking.
When you first got a chance to taste Shackleton's whiskey, you had a look on your face. I saw your National Geographic where they were recording it as you were doing it. What was going through your mind at the moment when you were tasting that?
I think many things were going through my head. I love and passionate believe in history, and I love to think about it all the time. But what I really thought about it was I was touching bottles that possibly the men, and even perhaps, Frank Wilde or even Ernest Shackleton had maybe touched that bottle. And he toasted and used these whiskies. We gave him 25 cases. There's only 3 cases. I hate to think where the rest were, but they must have had a good time. But nevertheless, they were not, alcoholics or anything. They were very careful because they had to be meticulous, especially, drinking out in the Antarctica. But what they did more than anything was they celebrated their achievements together as a team of the 15 men that were in that hut. But I'd like to just think what was going through my head more than anything was, I'm now sharing it with these men. But then the first thing also I thought was, wait a minute, is this going to be drinkable? And then to have it drunk and to see that it was absolutely palatable, it was a memory. This is something that will be engraved in my heart for the rest of my life. But just to be a little small part of maybe perhaps Ernest Shackleton's life.
So what happened to those 3 bottles?
Well, I have to say to you immediately, I'm a bit sad because I really did want to retain these 3 bottles in Scotland. And I have to tell you that we opened all 3 of them. And why did we do that? We wanted to be quite sure that our analysis was correct, because we discovered that the first 2 had detergent levels in it. And we wondered, well, where did it come from? And we discovered, of course, that these bottles had been cleaned out. But the last bottle actually had a little bit more, and it was just an extra clean that had probably gone through. But we had to be absolutely sure that not just one was the analysis. We had to do all 3 to see that it was a general analysis of it. So when we had finished, they said, right, we want the bottles back. And I said, of course, you want them back? I wanted to keep them. No, you can't keep them. Anything that you take or remove from the Antarctica must be put back. So I understand the Prime Minister of New Zealand actually took them back to the Antarctica, and it's once again under the hut. Yes, I know. I can see your face. because
Time to go.
Yeah, because it was quite sad. But again, we were respecting history. It's going back to Ernest Shackleton, and that is being preserved. Never forget, all the bottles that was produced from the 50,000 to the 100,000 to even the present ones. The money that has been raised for buying these goes back to preserve that history, not only of Ernest Shackleton, but of Scott as well, to preserve the future and to keep the place neat, tidy, but lots of memories of these great explorers.
So you do some scientific research on it, and you run it through an analysis, and you also do the nosing and the tasting. What percentage of that comes from one and from the other?
Both. It's great to nose and to find the different flavors and the different nuances, but it's even better when Dr. James Pride did his analysis and was able to say, yes, it's 3.5, it's come from Orkney. We've had this kind of whiskey that's had a cask. There are wine orientated. We think it's a sherry. We can just detect certain notes. The analysis proves that. But more importantly, it's actually showing you that our forefathers, their distillation methods at that time were almost comparable with the ones that we do today. And that was something pretty exciting. So it really, my hat goes off to our forefathers to say they got it right. Did Shackleton go away with a great whiskey? He went to somewhere that they knew were going to give you a whiskey at 47. They knew that it wasn't going to freeze. So these were professional people helping to stimulate and to help with exploration for the future.
In watching how you teach people how to drink and nose a whiskey, did you have a moment when you wanted to swirl that and throw it out of the glass?
Not on this occasion, no. I wanted to savor that moment. What you mean by that is I normally, just so people are fully aware, I do swirl the whiskey around the glass and then I do throw it in the carpet. As you can look around here in Scotland, this is the most expensive carpet in the world. But what I do purposely, when you throw it on the carpet or throw it out the glass, it removes any possible bad odors that might be lingering on the tip of the glass. So that's why, although I do it, people say you really don't do that back in Scotland. Actually, I do. But when that particular one, with it being so valuable, so important, I was not tempted to throw it.
Well, if you could, give me your way of tasting. I would like to do, actually, if I can ever get in touch with Fred No, maybe this is our chance to do our challenge back and forth, is to get to hear how you do a tasting, and then we'll see how the Kentucky Hug fits into all of this.
All right. So what we've got here, let me just, yeah. Right. So what you've got here, I just wanted to make sure you're fully aware, is that we've got 3 glasses. Okay. All right. Now there's 3 glasses. This is the first glass. This is the first glass that is called the sherry glass. It's the Copa Capita glass. But as you can quite clearly see, it's a very small glass. And, unlike the other glasses, you can, the tumbler-shaped glass, you can get all 5 fingers in the glass. Whereas this one here, when you pick it up, you can hardly get, 1 fingernail into the glass. So this is one that my great-great-grandfather used and my father used. But then when I came into the industry, it was this one here, which is more tulip-shaped, like the shape of a tulip. The stem is a little bit shorter, but then somewhere in the region of must be 11 years ago, this one came in here where the stem is a little bit longer. So what I do is you first of all get the glass, you shake it around, and then you get a hold of the bottle and you put it there. So what I mean by that is you swirl it around, and this is one that you can just show you throw it in the carpet. But when you throw it in the carpet, you can see the lip of the glass holding the whiskey, and therefore the drips are there, and that's what actually keeps possibly the bad odors that might be lingering, although I have to say they're all meticulously washed every occasion. But then you go back to it. You pour it into the glass. Now, you must never hold the glass like this. That's holding it right round. You must never warm it, as we say, chambering it there. Mm-hmm. That's warming it up, because all these lovely nuances are being warmed up and evaporating very quickly. But the worst thing is you can never nose it like this, keeping it away from the nose underneath like that. That's absolutely useless. And if you do that, I will have to kill you. So you swirl it around, bring it up, and then you say, hello. So the alcohol hits your nose first, you forget the alcohol, then you go into the heart of the whiskey and say, how are you? But please, you're doing it very, very slowly. And then you go back again and say, quite well, thank you very much. Now you've got 2 nostrils, one will be better than the other. So that's why when I bring it up in the morning, I might be there, and by the afternoon, I might be there. But one will be better than the other. But if you go like this and go like this and nose it like that, and then suddenly your eyes go very funny, that means you're nosing it too aggressively. So what you need to do is to go back to it and say hello. And as soon as you forget the alcohol, you can see the softness, the honey, the spice, but you can see towards the end that little hint of peat that's lingering in the background. Then when it comes to tasting it, not knocking it back like a cowboy, it's holding it on the top of the palate. This is an aged whiskey, so you must keep it in your palate for at least 20 seconds. So you put it in the top of the tongue, then underneath it, and then back in the top again. So give it at least 10-15 seconds if you can, top, then underneath, and then back up. If it goes beyond 20 seconds, the longer you keep it, the better. Because it's like eating food. If you swallow the food, you don't get any flavor. Whereas you chew it, the longer you chew it, the better it is. Always think of your American artist, Jackson Pollock. 1949, 1951, he splats it with his canvas, with all the different paints. And people used to say, Jackson, your paintings are a mess. And he said, no, they're not. If you look at my paintings, you'll see an inner world. Well, you've got to give it time to see that. Well, it's the same with the whiskey. You must give it time, especially when it's been under the ice for 103 years.
Do you tend to let your whiskey set on the table for a certain amount of time before you drink it?
What Greg did this morning was we had all these samples out this morning before you arrived. We put them out. We let them chambre a wee bit, let them open up. Sometimes they arrive. They're sometimes cold. And we let it and leave it here. And then we'll nose them straight. Then maybe add a little water to open them up. Then go back to it. We want to be quite sure. But when we do our nosing in the warehouses, we will then look at these whiskies and then we'll bring them back here for room temperature to arise, and that will help to reveal every facet of that whiskey.
So how strong is your breath in your nose? I mean, because like I say, if you tend to breathe in heavily, your eyes will start to water and all you'll smell is alcohol, it seems like.
No, you look at that particular whiskey sample as an invitation. So when I'm looking at it, I'm really quite excited. The best part of our job for Greg and I is to go into the warehouse and look at the casks. The casks may look all the same, but when we put them into the glass, we smell it, then we add the water, it reveals itself completely. And you get some mysteries that come up and say, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Or the time that it has had that enhancement in the port, the wine, the sherry, what have you, has has brought it to a higher level. And it's sometimes that is the real reward that we get, to see a whiskey going from one level of excellence to pure luxury.
Very good. This has been a real treat. I appreciate you revealing all your secrets
Not
today.
at all. Big pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Whiskey Lore is a production of Travel Fuels Life. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you show your support by providing ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And remember, you must be subscribed to make sure to catch these little bonus episodes that I toss in here, because they're only up for a couple of days. And if you want a chance to see the video of Richard Paterson's tasting, then make sure that you're signed up as a member of the Whiskey Lore Society. Just go to whiskey-lore.com/sign-up. Absolutely free of charge, and we'll have lots of bonus goodies for you along the way. Thanks everybody for checking out the episode, and until next time, cheers and sláinte mhath.